It's gone remarkably quiet over the whole issue as to whether Graham Potter will or won't be sacked. Or let me rephrase, social media continues to peddle out story after story about potential managers in the frame to take over from Potter. But what is coming out from the club is pretty limited, unless, of course, you believe that it's actually the club who is pushing or who are pushing all the stories of various managers being lined up. Now, I believe for once that the club is actually staying tight lipped out of courtesy to the current manager, and they're just allowing social media to be social media to continue spouting theory after theory without not a lot of real fact behind it as to what might be going on. Now, if you're new to the West Ham Boys, or if you've watched me before but yet to become a subscriber, please do consider subscribing to the West Ham Boys. All the main content is free on the channel. You can, of course, become a member with just a few additional short videos as well. But if you've yet to subscribe, please do subscribe. Otherwise, at the very least, please do hit the like button if you enjoy the show. Now, the general consensus is probably not wrong. It's almost definite that Graham Potter will be leaving West Ham sometime soon. And it's just a matter of time, I guess, rather than definite, rather than if. Now, in some quarters, the belief is that Nuno is the main man, is the favourite to replace Graham Potter. And it's been suggested that the hold-up is merely over Nuno's severance package from Nottingham Forest. And the sooner that he gets that sorted out, then the sooner he can take over the reins at West Ham. In other quarters, there is the more cynical suggestion that the club believe that the next two games are unwinnable, therefore not wanting to expose any new manager to face both Everton and Arsenal away. What a complete load of twaddle. Whoever came up with that notion must have really been scratching around for a sensational headline. Why would Nuno or anybody else not relish the opportunity to go and get points for West Ham United in their first games, whether they're home or away? And of course, there are some who believe that the delay is some cunning plan by David Sullivan to introduce a new manager for the game against Brentford at home, which is the one that's planned to be boycotted by fans. And, the theory is that what good fan wouldn't come to support a new manager instead of boycotting? I don't know. Is Sullivan that clever? Now, could any of these be legit reasons? Well, maybe. Perhaps the most obvious one to me is Nuno really is sorting out his severance package, or perhaps, just maybe, West Ham are not actually planning to replace Graham Potter anytime soon. So as time passes by, it's looking more and more likely that Potter will be in charge of the game against Everton away, and with Arsenal soon after, almost definitely be in charge of that game as well, unless, of course, Everton give us a right old spanking. But what happens if Potter gets results from one or both of these games that are coming up? Does he get a stay of execution until what? The end of the season, maybe? Look, for me, if he does, we'll most certainly get relegated. What could happen is that should Potter get some positive results from the next two games, is that he may be granted a stay of execution, because the next opportunity to sack him, if need be, will probably be the November international break or the Christmas break. Well, no, there isn't a Christmas break, but Christmas time itself. But by then, candidates to replace him, like Nuno and others, might no longer be available. Now, of course, the really cynical would say that Sullivan is clinging on as he doesn't want to pay Potter any compensation until the break clause at the end of the season. But it's been confirmed by The Athletic that apparently there is no break clause in the 2.5-year deal that was agreed earlier this year. So if there's no break clause, it makes no odds as to when Potter is going to be sacked, doesn't it? Now, If there is another reason why there could be a delay in sacking Graham Potter, what could it be? Could it be down to perhaps David Sullivan planning to break a habit of a lifetime and going for a manager who might still be in employment? Now, this would inevitably result in not only Sullivan having to pay off Graham Potter to leave early, but also to pay a break clause to the club where this manager might still be working at. Is it possible? Is it feasible? Is it likely? We know up to now it's not been likely. But the one thing that Sullivan is all too aware of is the voice of discontent from the fan base with the demands that the club should be better managed going forward and not to keep making the same mistakes over and over again. And making the same mistake after Potter will just bring in what? Another out of work manager who will just continue to be a sticking plaster for maybe a couple of years, only for the club to inevitably find itself in the same situation again in the future. So it is quite possible that Nuno is going to come in at some point as a replacement. But what will happen? Well, we know what will happen. We already know what Nuno is like. I think he's a similar type of manager to that of David Moyes. And what will then happen is he'll stabilize us for a while, probably keep us in the Premier League, get us, some decent results. And then in a couple of years' time, what happens then? Well, I think we all know. We'll all be demanding that Nuno leaves because the football is boring. Now, another reason for Sullivan to want to seriously move away from the usual business model of bringing in a quick fix manager is that we've been asking him, the fan base have been asking him to adopt a long-term plan, to give the squad, a bit more stability, to give us a sense of strategy and direction rather than going for the short-term fix, which ends up sometimes working, sometimes not working. Certainly hasn't worked in the last couple of seasons, has it? Or certainly in the last season. Now, if players know that a manager is coming in for the long term rather than yet another short term fix, then maybe the reaction of the players might be a little bit different. There was no faith in Lopetegui. There doesn't seem to be a lot of faith in Potter. So maybe Nuno can get a tune out of them. But what if he doesn't? So what does Sullivan do? Well, I think he's got one of three options mainly. He's either going to stick with Potter and hope that he has enough about him to keep us in the Premier League come the end of the season. As I said, for me, if Potter stays, I think we go down. Or get rid of Potter now or soon and bring in a short-term replacement, go with the same old, and hope that whoever comes in will galvanize this team and keep us in the Premier League. Or thirdly, go for a manager who's not only the right fix for now, for this season, but the right fix for seasons to come. And with the exception of one or two managers who are currently out of work, most of these types of managers, long-term fix managers, are already in employment. Now, of those, the list grows day by day. I've lost count how many more managers have been added. Scott Parker, I think, has been added recently, and various others. But for me, the three managers currently in work who could be main targets are Andoni Iraola of Bournemouth, Oliver Glasner of Crystal Palace, and Marco Silva of Fulham. Now, I'm focusing on these three managers for one main reason. They've all currently got 1 year left or under 1 year left now on their respective contracts. But which of these managers, if any, are going to be willing to step away from what they currently have at their respective clubs in order to walk into the shitstorm at West Ham United? Now, it would not have gone unnoticed in the footballing world that West Ham is a deeply unhappy place to be at the moment. Now, when you look at Bournemouth, when you look at Palace, when you look at Fulham, none of these clubs strike me to be in any turmoil, to be in any level of crisis that we're in. So if you're Glasner, Silva, Iraola, are you really going to want to leave what you currently have? And what can West Ham offer that these clubs can't? Well, at one stage, I would have said a bigger fan base. Imagine the roar of 60 odd thousand fans behind you. But the recent managers haven't had that roar of 60,000 plus fans for an awful long time. Could a new manager change that? Yeah, possibly. Bringing a different style of football will certainly get bums on seats again, I've no doubts. Then there could be the argument that we have more money to spend on player transfers than these other clubs. But even that's not clear cut anymore either. Let's not forget, Sullivan was holding out the begging bowl for most of the summer transfer window, reminding everyone that cared to listen, as regular as clockwork, that we were in danger of breaching PSR rules and we had no money to spend. The problem has always been that we've been cash poor. We've always been a cash poor club. But then why arrange the overdraft facilities that he did and then not use them for the transfers when the opportunity arose? So, any potential manager, any potential replacement to Graham Potter will know all too well what sort of environment they'll be letting themselves in for. Would any of them relish coming to a club where they might not even be able to strengthen the squad in the January transfer window? But having said that, we still spent more than Bournemouth, Fulham, and Crystal Palace in the summer that's just gone. Now, admittedly, it's included the obvious obligation to make John Clare Tadebo's contract a loan to permanent, but it resulted in us spending over £140 million this summer, with a player return of about 85 million. For Iraola's Bournemouth, they spent 130 million in the summer, but they generated a whopping 238 million pounds in player sales. That's great. That's a great business model, that is. Crystal Palace, they only spent 50 million in the transfer market and with player sales of over 70 million. And Fulham, with only one real main purchase over the summer of about 40 million pounds, they generated a return of 10 million pounds in sales. So for Iraola, for Glasner, for Silva, West Ham could still be an attraction, to manage, because there is likely to be a way to find transfer funds to boost the squad, because for some reason, David Sullivan always seems to do so. He'll plead poverty, and we don't always spend money in the January window. But if he is going to get a new manager in, I think he's going to have to give some kind of commitment to spending a little bit of cash. Now, as far as manager salaries are concerned, it would only really be Iraola. I've said his name about 4 different ways by now, haven't I? It would only be Iraola who would benefit, as he's rumoured to be one of the lowest paid managers in the Premier League, with a salary of something between £1 to £1.5 million a year. And herein lies the other benefit if West Ham were to target him specifically. Because to compensate Bournemouth in prizing Iraola away from his current contract, given that there's only a year left or under a year left, should cost no more than £1.5 million. It's not really a lot, considering when some clubs have spent quite an awful lot of money to prize managers away from their respective clubs. But then I guess Iraola would expect a pay increase if he was to come to a bigger club like West Ham. And I would imagine he'd want to at least double his salary, if not more so. Now, to pay off Potter on what's left of his 2.5-year deal, which is valued at about £3 million a year, that's going to cost us a significant amount of money, give or take £5 million. So in all, to get, say, Iraola to replace Potter, it's not only going to cost to compensate him or Bournemouth, it's going to cost to get rid of Potter as well. It could cost anything to the tune of, say, what, £6.5 million? Now, all 3 managers bring qualities that would appeal to David Sullivan, but could also appeal to the wider fan base. They all, of course, have Premier League experience, a prerequisite for David Sullivan. Silva will bring qualities of attacking football. He's good at player development, which will be music to the academy players' ears, and he's a flexible tactician. not a one-trick pony. Iraola, for his qualities, he's renowned for high press football, and he's well overachieved with the limited resources at his disposal, despite even losing key players. But he continues to get the squad he's got to flourish. And then when it comes to Glasner, he's a strategist, built on a structured defense. But he still allows his players to express themselves in the attacking third. Now, he's recently won, of course, the FA Cup and the Charity Shield, and is now in Europe. And he's revitalised the club, which has been steadily managed over the years. Can't say that about West Ham. All three managers will certainly hit the ground running, and West Ham need a massive boost to get us out of the predicament we're in. But what will David Sullivan do? Will he do the right thing, or will he resort to type? It's going to be interesting to see what happens over the coming weeks. It looks as if Potter is here for the short term, but will he be here for the rest of this season?